I want to start today with, well, a lie that we all tell ourselves.
Oh, jumping right in. I like it.
Yeah, we've got a lot to cover in deep dive number 53. But this lie, it's a really comfortable one, the kind Hollywood loves. It's the idea that we change our lives in these big dramatic explosions.
Right, the classic movie montage.
Exactly. You get fired, or you survive some terrible accident, or you pack up your car and move to a new city, and bang, you are instantly a completely different person. We treat our lives like a map full of these giant landmarks.
We put a pin in the map and say, that right there is the exact moment I became who I am today.
Yes, because it makes us feel like we're the authors of our own story.
It's a very clean, organized way to look at human history. It gives us that illusion of control over our own narrative.
Right, but I've been digging through the notes you brought for today. This whole analysis on changes too small to notice, and the source material is essentially saying this entire landmark theory is just totally wrong.
It really pushes back on it, yes.
It's arguing that if you, as a listener, are just sitting around waiting for a huge moment to understand yourself, you're missing the actual show.
That is the core provocation we're unpacking today. The sources we're looking at argue that those major landmarks are actually the least interesting part of your evolution.
Which sounds crazy at first.
It does, but the real rewriting of your cognition, your personality, yourself, really isn't happening during the dramatic breakup. It's happening in these tiny moments that are technically too small for you to even notice.
Too small to notice. I mean, that's kind of a terrifying phrase. It implies we have these massive blind spots in our own heads.
We do, and our mission for this deep dive is to expose those blind spots.
Yeah.
We're going to explore how micro behaviors, things operating way below the threshold of your conscious awareness, are slowly accumulating to rewrite your internal operating system.
Okay, but before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, we need to set the tone, because the text is super specific about how we should approach this, right?
Very specific. We have to establish the no judgment clause.
Right, no moral panic.
Precisely. It is so easy to look at modern digital habits and just say, oh, look at how terrible technology is. Our brains are melting. The source explicitly warns us against that trap.
So we aren't here to critique the modern world.
We are not. We're here to observe what the text calls interference patterns and gradients. We need to look at this like it's physics, not morality.
I love that. Let's put on the lab coats. So if I'm not changing because of a huge life event, what is actually changing me? Because the source lists some behaviors that honestly seemed incredibly boring to me at first.
That is exactly their camouflage. They seem boring. The text highlights things like watching video content at 1.25x or 2x speed.
Feel too.
Or consuming fragments, YouTube shorts, reels, or even just reading a headline in the first paragraph of an article and moving on.
Okay, hold on. Let's stop at the 1.25x speed thing. I do that constantly. If I'm listening to an audiobook or watching a tutorial, I crank it up. But I don't feel like I'm fundamentally rewiring my soul. I feel like I'm saving time.
Sure.
You're telling me that counts as a cognitive update.
The efficiency angle, that's just the story you tell yourself to justify it. But look at the actual mechanism. The source also points to specific scroll patterns, like how your thumb physically interacts with a feed, or your habits around toggling notifications on and off, or the subtle shift from deep, focused reading to scanning.
But again, if you ask me to describe who I am, I would never say, hi, I'm a guy who scans text and scrolls really fast with his left thumb. Those things feel like air. They're nothing.
And that is exactly why they are so powerful. The structural voice in the text makes a really crucial distinction here about why we miss this. It says big events are narratized.
Meaning we turn them into stories.
Yes, you tell a story. You say, I got fired, so I learned resilience. Because it's a narrative, you're highly aware of it, you can hold it up and look at it.
Right.
But these micro habits, they aren't stories. The text defines them purely as processing style.
Processing styles. So it's not about what is happening to me, it's about how I'm processing the data of my life?
Correct. Because you never sit down and turn watching a video at 2x speed into an epic story. It completely bypasses your self-awareness. It sneaks right in through the back door.
Man. So it's like an invisible software update running in the background while I'm staring at the big shiny application on the screen.
Exactly. And usually when we do finally notice these habits, like when you realize you literally cannot watch a slow-paced movie without reaching for your phone, we fall into that judgment trap we mentioned.
We call it brain rot.
We judge it. We call it a shortened attention span.
I mean, I was just thinking that. It feels like a deficit. It feels like I've lost the ability to focus.
And the text argues that framing it as a deficit is a mistake. If you just label it bad, you stop trying to understand it. Instead of a deficit, The source suggests we view it as a shift in processing scale.
A shift in scale. Okay.
It's not necessarily a loss of capacity. It is a fundamental change in the texture of how you process reality itself.
Okay, let's dig into this texture idea, because this is where the source material gets a little heavy on the theory. It starts talking about gradients and tilts. How does my thumb swiping on a screen change the core of who I am?
This brings us to a concept the text calls reflective humanism. The source proposes that human cognition is not a fixed point.
Okay.
You aren't a statue standing still in a museum. You are a trajectory. You are a continuous movement with phase.
Meaning I'm always in motion?
Yes. And when you look at the world through those binary labels we talked about, this habit is good, this habit is bad, you artificially freeze that motion. You stop the generation of meaning.
I see.
The text suggests that instead of looking for fixed points, we need to look at gradients, slopes, and directions.
So it's more about the angle that I'm currently moving at.
Exactly. The update to your cognition rarely happens via a direct collision.
Define collision for me in this context.
A collision is disconnected time. It is a sudden, steep gradient. Reality hits you hard, it's painful, and you are forced to update your worldview on the spot.
So the car crash, the firing, the landmark theory again.
Right. But the text argues that the modern world is mostly updating us via inquiry generation, or what it calls tilts.
And a tilt is what? Just a gentle slope.
Think of it as a generic 0.01 degree shift in your angle of perception.
Okay.
In the exact moment it happens, it is entirely imperceptible. It's not a violent impact, it's just a slight leaning. The text calls it a microphase shift.
But 0.01 degrees is basically a rounding error. If I'm walking down the street and I adjust my path by 0.01 degrees, I'm still just walking down the street.
In a single instance, yes. But here's where the math and a concept called recursion comes in. Recursion is essentially looping or repetition.
Right.
If you change your trajectory by 0.01 degrees, but you recursively repeat that loop 10,000 times a day,
I end up in a totally different zip code.
you end up in a completely different coordinate system. You see the world differently. You react differently. You literally are different.
Wow.
But if I asked you to point to the exact moment it happened, you couldn't do it.
Because there was no moment. It was a slope.
Precisely. It was a gradient. The source contrasts collision generation, which is painful and highly visible, with this inquiry gradient.
Okay.
These modern habits, the scrolling, the speed watching, they're a form of continuous quiet update. They minimize pain because they are so gradual. They change us without the drama of a crash.
That makes a lot of sense conceptually. We're constantly tweaking the software rather than waiting for the whole system to crash and reboot. But I have to push back a little on the minimizing pain part.
Go ahead.
Because even if it's not a car crash, this modern life, this fragmented, high-speed, notification-heavy reality, it doesn't actually feel peaceful to me. It feels frantic.
You've hit on the central tension of the whole text. The big question is this fragmentation a sign of decline? Are we actually losing the ability to think deep thoughts?
Right. If I'm watching everything at 2x speed and only reading headlines, am I just skimming the surface of life? Is it just quantity over quality now?
And this is where we have to be very careful with our assumptions. The structural voice offers a profound reframing here.
That's the reframe.
It suggests we might not be looking at a decline in intelligence at all, but rather a shift in priorities. We're moving from narrative depth to micro-interference density.
Micro-interference density. That sounds like a metric for a cell tower. Break that down for me.
It implies that the human brain is now prioritizing the frequency of inputs over the magnitude or size of the input.
Okay.
Historically, humans learned and updated through long, deep stories. That's narrative depth. You sit by the fire, you listen to the epic poem for hours.
Right.
Now, we are trading that depth for a high density of tiny, rapid interferences.
So instead of reading one long novel for 10 hours, I'm reading 3,000 tweets, I'm watching 50 shorts, and I'm scanning 10 articles.
Correct. And the source suggests that this fragment consumption isn't just you wasting time, it actually acts as an experimental ground for the brain. By receiving huge amounts of tiny interferences, just little snippets of data, a flash of emotion, a soundbite, a joke, your internal OS is being rewritten silently. It is gathering data points at a massive, massive scale.
Oh, it's like training a machine learning model. You don't feed an AI one giant encyclopedia and say, read this and learn everything. You feed it billions of tiny, disconnected, fragmented images and text snippets.
That is the perfect analogy. And the source explicitly avoids concluding that one way is objectively better. It doesn't say narrative depth is superior to interference density.
It just observes it.
Exactly. It observes it as a phase shift in how humans process reality. We are simply becoming different types of processors.
But does that make us better processors? Or just faster, twitchier ones?
Well, that depends entirely on what the environment requires from you. If your environment is stable and slow, narrative depth is fantastic.
Hmm.
But if your environment is chaotic, incredibly fast, and nonlinear, maybe interference density is the necessary adaptation.
You mentioned the internal OS earlier, and the text gets pretty granular about this analogy, doesn't it? It's not just a passing metaphor.
No, the source maps it out structurally. It frames your inner operating system in layers. Layer 1 is simply your inputs, what comes in through your eyes and ears.
Right, the raw data.
Layer 2 is your default loops. These are your automatic knee-jerk reactions to that data.
Like when I feel a tiny bit bored standing in an elevator, my hand automatically reaches for my phone. That's a default loop.
Perfect example. The argument is that these micro-behaviors, the scrolling, the speed settings, are constantly rewriting those default loops in layer 2.
Okay.
And eventually that rewrite trickles up to layer 3, which is your recursion or your deep contemplation.
So the way I scroll actually changes the default way I react to the world, which then eventually changes how I fundamentally think about the world.
It changes the very rhythm of your thought. And this brings us right back to that feeling you mentioned a minute ago, that frantic feeling. The text has a specific name for it. It calls it transparent pain.
Transparent pain. Man, that is a haunting phrase. It sounds like a ghost. What does it actually mean?
It describes the friction that occurs when our internal processing system, which has historically been linear and narrative-based, clashes with the external gradients of the modern world, which are nonlinear, incredibly fast, and heavily fragmented.
Let me make sure I'm getting this. So the world is moving in this chaotic cloud of fast fragments, but my brain is still desperately trying to draw a straight, coherent line through it all.
Exactly. And that mismatch creates friction. You don't feel it as a sharp, identifiable pain like a broken arm.
Right.
You feel it as this vague sense of excessive speed or visual overload or just a creeping, low-level sense of meaninglessness.
It's a feeling of too muchness.
Yes, it is transparent because you can't just point at one specific thing and say, that right there is the source of my pain. It's everywhere and nowhere. It's just this background hum.
I think everyone listening to this has felt that exact hum. It's that Sunday night feeling where you haven't technically done anything wrong or stressful, but you feel completely vibrated, like your nervous system has just been rattled.
And importantly, the source says this pain is actually a signal. It isn't a symptom of a disease or a failure on your part. It is a symptom of adaptation.
Oh, wow.
It is the literal friction of your OS desperately trying to update itself to match this new high-density environment.
That honestly completely changes how I look at my own stress levels. I usually see that kind of frantic stress as a personal failure, like, oh, I failed to be calm today. But you're saying it's just growing pains.
It's an installation in progress.
Installation in progress. I love that. But this really brings us back to the whole blind spot issue. If this transparent pain is just background noise and these habits are just invisible processing styles, we really are flying completely blind here.
That is the ultimate implication we have to face. If we are only ever looking for changes in our major life events, our stories, we completely miss the fact that our OS has already been swapped out.
Right.
You might be a totally different person today, not because you moved to a new city last year, but because of the specific way you've been scanning information and scrolling for the past 6 months.
That is profound. I am not the same person I was, not because of what happened to me, but because of how I interacted with the stream of data.
And that connects directly to how the source defines consciousness itself. It makes a bold claim. Consciousness is not a subject.
Meaning there isn't a little person sitting inside my head driving the bus.
Right. Consciousness is defined as an interference pattern.
Like waves crashing into each other in a pool of water.
Yes. We are the ongoing result of whatever we interact with. If your daily interactions are long, deep narratives, like reading a classic novel for a few hours, your interference pattern looks a certain way.
It's probably smooth, rolling, long wavelengths.
Exactly. But if your interactions are made up of millions of microfragments, texts, push notifications, likes, 5-second videos, the interference pattern changes its core texture. It becomes incredibly choppy, high frequency.
So if I change the input speed, I am literally changing the pattern of my consciousness. I mean, it sounds dramatic when you say it out loud, but based on the physics we're discussing, it holds up.
It is entirely structural. We are the shape of the collision between our brain and the world. If you change the world into a series of high-speed fragments, you change the shape of the self.
Okay, But is there a danger zone here? Because if I'm just a pattern of interference and I flood my own system with way too much high-frequency noise, do I eventually just crash?
The text does offer a specific caution regarding that. It touches on this concept of spare capacity, or simply space.
Ah, breathing room.
Right. To actually process these continuous micro-changes, to make any sense of this new high-frequency pattern, we require recursion. We need the ability to loop back and look at the process itself.
Okay.
But recursion absolutely requires spare capacity.
So you need empty RAM to run the diagnostic tool.
That's it exactly. If the density of the interference is too high, meaning if we are always scrolling, always listening at 2x speed, constantly engaged with input, we never have that spare capacity.
So the update never actually finishes installing.
Or it installs poorly. It installs with bugs.
Yikes.
The danger isn't the 1.25x speed of the video. The danger isn't the app itself. The real danger is the complete lack of space to let that interference settle into a coherent pattern. We need the silence to actually recognize the tilt.
That completely reframes the idea of taking a break. It makes the pause almost a technological necessity, not just some soft wellness tip. It's not about relaxing. It's about compiling the code.
Precisely. It's a critical part of the engineering of the self. Without the pause, you are nothing but input. You are just pure reaction. The pause is the only place where reaction can become wisdom.
Man, so what does this all mean for us, practically? We've got these invisible tilts, these micro updates, this transparent pain humming in the background. And obviously we can't exactly throw our phones into the ocean and go live in the woods.
No, and the text doesn't suggest we should do that anyway. Remember, this isn't about rejecting the modern world or judging it.
The lab experiment.
It's about waking up to the reality that we are updating via these tiny tilts, not the dramatic crashes. Our internal OS is constantly shifting based on density and frequency.
We are becoming creatures of high-frequency interference.
Yes. So we shouldn't judge the shift, but we absolutely must notice it. Because if you don't notice the tilt, you're going to end up somewhere you never intended to go, and you won't even know how you got there.
That is the blind spot.
The text actually leaves us not with a neat conclusion. It doesn't hand us a list of rules like do this, don't do that. It just leaves us with a provocation, a final inquiry for you to think about.
And it's a really good one. I want to leave you, the listener, with this exact thought from the source material. It is essentially asking you to stop staring at the big landmarks in your life and start paying attention to the gradients.
The central question is this: where is your cognition actually updating from? Is it from those major events you talk about at dinner parties, the polished stories you've rehearsed over and over?
Or is it from the subtle shifts in your processing patterns? The playback speed, the endless scroll, the quick glance at a notification, the things you don't even notice happening.
Are you a product of your stories or your scroll speed?